Oh, good afternoon. Welcome back to the Iowa blog. We're here in the library studio, and that means we're going to continue our series on the last word picture. We've actually finished the 31st and final mashal or proverb, but that's not the end of the story. God has a great deal more to say about the intervention that literally saved the world, had the discussion that we have chronicled in the 31st Mashal not have occurred as it is recorded by the king himself as he presents this intervention by his adoptive mother and his adoptive father, then the world would be a very different place than it is now, because Dode would not have gotten back up after having fallen down, and there would have been no fulfillment of Pesach, Matzah, and Bakurim, which means there'd be no opportunity for an extension of life or even a chance to make this human experiment that Yahweh engaged in 6,000 years prove valuable. It would have all have been lost. So we're going to proceed on this line. My intent here is I'm going to present the 54th chapter of Yashaya, at least the first half of it, because it tells us ever more about this mother that came to visit with Dode 3,000 years ago and set him back on the straight and narrow path through the Torah. And then we're going to actually chronicle, and I've just finished my essay on it, what actually transpired to put Dode in this terrible place where he and Yahweh were on the outs. And so we'll go through all of that. It's rather shocking material. And following that, I'd like to delve into at least 2 or 3 additional Mizmor. We want to cover the 51st, which I think is the first expression after Yahweh's dressing down of his son following the Bathsheba situation, where Dode just wallows all over himself. And then I want to deal with the 116th, which is really a celebration of the relationship thereafter. So we'll make our way through the Mizmor and try to get our some bearings and closure on all of this before we turn our attention to back to other subjects. So as we peruse my favorite prophet, that would be Yashaya, Isaiah, on the very same subject of this productive woman, this Amma, Yahweh's most productive mother, we find that the 53rd chapter speaks of what Dode accomplished on Pesach and Matzah, which was the entire purpose of the visit, is to get Dode back up after having fallen down so that Yahweh could work with him and trust him in the fulfillment of Pesach and Matzah. And of course, the 53rd chapter of Yashaya concludes with an affirmation of that. It reads, "Yet he himself bore the guilt of many, and he interceded for the guilty." So with that in mind, Pesach and Matzah, as we know, work in harmony to immortalize and perfect the covenant family. You know, every time I see perfect, I'm just going to need to stop for a moment and explain the process. It's something that I've come to appreciate recently, and it's a point that needs to be made over and over again. Yahweh is not interested in perfection. He would be bored out of his mind if we were conceived perfect. He is not trying to perfect us in the sense of making us flawless. It would be uninteresting for us and render us incapable of actually accomplishing anything that would prove our value to God or that we could be trusted by him. Tama'im, which is the Hebrew word, doesn't actually mean perfect. It is based upon the Hebrew root, the actionable root or verbal root, tamam, and it means to fulfill, to complete, to see the job through, to accomplish what needs to be done right to the very end. And so God's very definition of what he's trying to accomplish says nothing about being flawless. It says nothing about never making a mistake. It says that he is interested in us staying the course, that he wants us to see the job through, to engage and remain reliable, remain resolved to do what needs to be done and to not give up. So if you want a definition of what Yahweh was trying to achieve, it's not perfection. It's to being resolute, to being committed and willing to engage and to stay that way. All right. So Pesach and Matzah, as we know, they work in harmony. They provide a doorway to extended life, and they remove our guilt on behalf, of course, of the covenant family. And since that is what is happening as we realize that Dowd himself bore the guilt of many when he interceded for this purpose, then we know that this is consistent. What this barren woman that Yahweh is going to address through his prophet Yeshaya accomplished with Dowd by causing Dowd to be productive again. The one woman who saved him became the mother of many, because it is Dowd who enabled the benefits of the covenant, which is the only way we become part of God's family. Now, what's particularly remarkable, all of the prophet's attention is being directed in everything we're going to discuss in the 54th chapter of Yeshaya toward a single remarkable woman. And this woman goes from being unable to conceive to being especially prolific with her husband. And in fact, the transition from one to another is so essential to the celebration of the covenant. God says he wants us all to shout for joy over this. So this is the outgrowth. This is the result of the final word picture, the last mashal. It says, you, of all women, should sing for joy as a ringing endorsement. Ranan, you, feminine singular, should want to shout, choosing to convey the lyrics of a woman overcome with delight in a jubilant song with a melodic and rhythmic accompaniment. It was described in the call imperative, call literal, imperative. This is free will expression of it in second person. And it was written so that the verb, the subject of the verb, is second person feminine singular. So, you, of all women, should sing for joy as a ringing endorsement. O barren and infertile woman who has not yet given birth, a car. Female who has not yet experienced natural childbirth for having been hamstrung in this regard. And she who has not yet borne a child, she who, this is Loa Yalad, she who has not during this confined period of time brought forth and delivered, called perfect, which conveys an actual relationship with a completed time frame, and thus not ongoing as a condition. So the woman also is being presented in third person feminine singular. So, and she who has not yet borne a child, you will become genuinely and ever more serene, bursting forth in happiness. Patzak. You will be at peace without any negative concerns or distress, sparkling and happy, gleaming, bright and cheerful. also second person feminine singular. Ecstatically delighted, Rena. So she will want to shout at the top of her lungs, with her appearance beaming. She'll want to choose to loudly convey a radiant message and countenance while she screams. She who has not yet writhed and trembled in labor. For indeed, great in abundance will be the children of the Shemim, of this desolate woman. Shemim is the deserted and abandoned woman. It was written as an actionable concept, as a call participle in the feminine singular, and so it's a verb that is also a noun. And therefore, Shemim, desolate woman, is an active title. From the children of Baal, the husband to whom she is married. Baal, the Lord and Master she has submitted to in matrimony. Guess what? It's also a verbal noun. Call participle was written feminine singular, speaking of the fact that she, this barren woman who is now conceiving, is doing so in harmony with Baal, her husband. That's not her husband here. It's the husband, Baal. Now, that statement was from Yashaya, which means salvation and deliverance, or from Yahweh, Isaiah 54:1. That's a long statement, isn't it? There's a lot to unpack there and to consider. So let's begin at the beginning, because I don't want anybody to miss any of this, because this is really an extraordinary statement. This is Yahweh speaking. He is speaking through the prophet Yeshua. And he is telling us that there is a woman who has not yet experienced natural childbirth. And that she is going to be the mother of many, so many that the world needs to sing and she needs to rejoice in this regard. And her proliferation of children is going to be produced through her Baal, through this Lord and Master of her life, who is her husband. And God's not obviously talking about somebody who, has, 13 kids or 14 kids, somebody that barefoot and pregnant their whole life, because those kids would probably be born into a religious family and would be stillborn. So he's talking about children that matter, children that he knows and cares about, children whose lives are worth celebrating. So that makes this even more spectacular. So God is saying, quite frankly, thank you, that there is a woman who has never experienced natural childbirth and the labor of natural childbirth, who is going to be celebrated as the mother of the covenant family in conjunction with Baal. Remember how Baal was used 3 times in the last word picture? Always in conjunction with the adoptive mother that was counseling Dowd as the son of God. And therefore, there is a man and a woman where they are working collaboratively to conceive the covenant family. And because she has the same husband, it is clear that that woman is the same that woman who saved Dowd, the woman who saved the Savior of the covenant, therefore becomes the mother of the covenant, does she not? Without her intervention as Dowd's adoptive mother, without her designation as the Amma of Yahweh, without her being celebrated as the Ashar, there are no children of the covenant because Dowd does not return to his post. So you, all of all women, you of all women, should sing for joy as a ringing endorsement. Ringing endorsement of what? Ringing endorsement of God's plan, of the achievements that are conveyed through his story of saving our Savior. So you of all women, sing for joy as a ringing endorsement. O barren and infertile woman who has not yet given birth. Therefore, this woman who is serving as the ringing endorsement of the great news of the covenant family has not had a child of her own through natural childbirth. I know such a woman. She had 6 miscarriages. There happened to be 6 women in the Torah and prophets who were barren. And all 6 of those women eventually had their infertile nature resolved favorably by Yahweh, including this one. And she who has not yet borne a child through natural childbirth, you will become genuinely and ever more serene, bursting forth in happiness. Leah has raised a daughter, but it was the daughter of her ex when he went off and had an affair with a woman. She conceived. She was crazy. She couldn't raise the child. And Leah stepped in and said, I'll do it. And she did. But that's not natural childbirth. That child is not part of the covenant. Leah, because of the uniqueness of her blood and the fact that her husband had the same blood type, when a fetus would form, her biological system would simply devour it. And so she was not able to conceive a child of her own. And now, because of that, she's in a position where she can fulfill this prophecy. So she will want to shout at the top of her lungs with her appearance beaming. And this is she who has not yet writhed and trembled in labor. Very, very specific is God in this whole thing. This is a woman who has not experienced natural childbirth. A miscarriage doesn't count in that regard. Someone who has not writhed and trembled in labor. And she is going to be the one who is celebrated. She's the one who is going to finally find her life not only meaningful, but extraordinary in God's presence. I mean, this is a powerful prophecy right in the midst of Yeshayah, immediately following that tremendous prophecy of how Dowd would finally serve as the Passover lamb. And so now that that has been acknowledged, Yahweh is giving credit to the woman who made that possible. For indeed, great and abundant will be the children of the Shamim desolate woman. Great and abundant, the Rab. So they're extraordinary children, both numerous and abounding in influence. They're the covenant children. And they are from the children of Baal. And that means that she did not do this alone. That the covenant family does have parents. They are the Shamim and Baal, the Amah and Yada. And this is according to someone who ought to know, says Yahweh. Now, we have already seen several of the many prophecies regarding the remarkable productive mother that Yahweh presents to his son, Dod, to restore their relationship, which was badly fractured. And we know that Ruth introduced this title in conjunction with delivering the Gaal, this very kinsman redeemer. Further, since the mother fulfilling this role in the last Mashal was married to Baal and became Asher, blessed and beneficial, as was proclaimed by Leah, it's obvious that this Shamim, a desolate woman, who is prophesied to conceive an abundance of children, is that very same person. Shamim, of course, is a clue in this regard because it shares the same root as Shem, name. Leah is among the very, very few Jews who celebrates being a Yehud and who acknowledges Yahweh's name. Shamim shares the same root as Shama, which means to listen, and Shamar, observe, which is the central core of her life. And these are all key elements in the transition from life to death or death to life for all of us. Even Shamaim, heaven, begins similarly. And the inclusion of the second mem in Shamem speaks of motherhood because of the breaking of the water of the embryonic sac at birth, along with the realization that water is indeed the source of life. It's Shamim would be words about water as the source of life. What this says is that my extremely introverted wife, who is currently tied up in knots over her rather abrupt transition from the obscurity of anonymity and the comfort of anonymity to divine recognition and fame, ultimately is going to be comfortable in the role and going to celebrate in it. Maybe we're going to have role reversal. I'm going to go from extroverted to introverted, and she's going to go from introverted to extroverted. Wouldn't that be a joy? But the good news here from my favorite prophet, and well, the God that actually spoke through him, is that she will grow into this role, and she will eventually celebrate her essential contribution. She's going to be openly appreciated for it. Moreover, now that my Leah understands it, it is like she's become more like me, if you will. You know, the more she understands what it is that she's been asked to do, the more that she will appreciate what I've been tasked with doing all of these years. She will be far more empathetic and supportive, knowing that she now is in the spotlight and how that feels and the added responsibility that comes with it. God says she's up to the task. As an interesting note, Leah is one of, as I have shared with you, and I'm now going to delve into them because I think it's interesting. Actually, she did the homework, and I'm going to report on it. That she is one of 6 women who are presented as barren, something that God eventually resolved on each occasion, including now Leah. And with Leah, who, as I have shared, endured exactly 6 miscarriages, while mothering the adoptive daughter of her abusive former husband. It is a nice parallel, is it not? Now, turning back the pages of time, we know all about Sarah as she is presented in Bereshith 11:30, because Yahweh caused the woman who laughed at him to conceive a child, Yishak, named Laughter, at the ripe young age of 80. Thereby initiating the covenant. After having been barren and now following the birth of her son, Sarah came to understand Yahweh's intent with the covenant, appreciating it far better than did her husband, Abraham. And since God agreed with Sarah, after Sarah told Abraham to send Hagar and Ishmael away because they were not to be included in this covenant, they were not part of the family, Yahweh said the following. You might want to listen. Then God said, with unfolding implications over time, to Abraham, this should not be seen as troubling, as wrong or bad by you, for regarding the child and pertaining to your Amma, productive mother, everything and anything, Asher, to show the way to the benefits of the relationship. Sarah, which means she engages and endures as a noble woman. She ever says to you, you should choose to listen to her voice, because through Yishak, laughter, your seed and therefore your offspring and descendants will be summoned and invited, met with and welcomed, recited and appointed for the Mikra. Bereshith in the beginning, opening book of the Torah, Genesis 21:12. Now, how do you like them apples? Here we go, and the first time that we are dealing with a barren woman. God told Abraham in front of Sarah that, nope, your plan is not my plan. We're not going to do this through the slave woman. We're going to do this the right way. Okay, so what if you're 100 and she's 80? Sarah is going to bear the first child of the covenant. And she busted out laughing. She said, I've been, infertile all my life. I'm now an old woman and I'm going to have a child. She laughed at God. She said, that's cool. I've got no problem with that. Name the child Laughter. That'll remind you of all of this. And 9 months later, she was pregnant and delivered a child. Well, she was probably pregnant immediately thereafter once they stopped laughing. And thereupon, the first child of the covenant was born. But what did God call her? He called her Amma, the productive mother. What's the first word that he said after Kol, following Amma? That she's Asher. She's the way to show the benefits of the relationship. And her name is to engage and endure. Pretty powerful, isn't it? I mean, with every word, if you just know where to look and what the clues are that Yahweh's laying, you can see right here a prophecy pointing directly to that last word picture, to the work of the Amma, to the woman known as Asher, to the first child of the covenant. So I'll share that again before we move on. Then God said, with unfolding implications over time, to Abraham, this should not be seen as troubling to you, sending Hagar and Ishmael away. It's not wrong. It's not even bad for you regarding the child and pertaining to your Amma, your productive mother. Everything and anything, Asher, to show the way to the benefits of the relationship. Sarah, meaning to engage and endure, ever says to you, you should choose to listen to her voice, because through Yishak, laughter and play, your seed and therefore your offspring and descendants, that will ultimately be the covenant family, will be summoned and invited, will be met with and welcomed, will be recited and appointed for the Mikra. Of course, from Kara. So when Sarah goes from barren to bearing, the first child of the covenant, she instantly becomes Abraham's Amah, productive mother. As the mother of the covenant, when that she says that others do not belong, yeah, well, she's supported by God. When Leah says, you do not belong in the covenant, God agrees. And when she speaks, we would do well to listen. That is the first reference to the Amah and the Isha. Rebecca is next. She was Yishak's wife. She was also barren for a while, as we discover in Bereshith 24:67. This was, of course, resolved with the twins, Esau and Jacob. Sometimes you get more than you bargain for, and that was explained in 25:23. We'll skip past that because, well, she didn't handle that all that well. She was a bit mischievous, and she left a resolution, something that would have to be resolved for the fractured family to be put back together, because she maneuvered Esau out of his birthright, such that Jacob took it all. And now the man from Edom comes from outside that family to resolve this and resolve that fracture and bring the entire family back together again. But anyway, next in line was Rachel, who was competing with Leah for her Gadol. Now, Gadol is rendered in almost all English Bibles as older, but it's not what it means. Gadol means far more important sister. So it was Rachel that was competing with Leah, who is the far more important sister, for Jacob's attention. And while she would conceive, her ongoing fascination with idols proved deadly, and she died giving birth to the very troubling legacy of Benjamin. She would become the forefather of the Shauls, both of them, the harbinger of political and religious rebellion. Now, as we know, initially Leah was fertile. She is famous for having become the mother of Yahud, beloved of Yah. But when her childbearing years had passed, she became the model of Ashar, blessed and beneficial, as a surrogate mother, not unlike the role she was playing, our Leah, was playing before Dode in the final word picture, becoming a surrogate mother. Much lesser known, there's also the wife of Manoah. That is presented in Shaphat Shaphat Judges 13, 1-7. After being unable to conceive, she was approached by a malak of Yahweh. While Israel was maliciously religious at the time and subsequently harassed by the Philistines, she was told that she would conceive a Netzir, a dedicated and devoted one, and all to forestall Israel's collapse. Well, that's interesting. In this prophetic implications, when asked his name, the malak bringing this message said, Hu Philai. It's either he or it, is wonderful beyond comprehension. Thereafter, he rose to heaven in the midst of a fire that was set for an uplifting offering, and his departure then serves to demonstrate the transformative symbolism that's inherent in the Moedim, as we're asked to approach the Isha, the feminine nature of the fiery light. Now, the sixth barren woman was the wife of Elkanah. God acquires and obtains is what his name means. Chana, favored and generous, speaking to Yahweh, made a nadar, a vow, similar to that ascribed to the bull, using the same word that would be redeeming the remnant of Israel in Numbers 15. Thereafter, she called herself Ama Ath, your productive mother, not once, but twice, while requesting the Zerah seed of an Ish individual man to offer to Yahweh every day of his life without interruption. She conceived and gave birth to Shamuel. And that's the prophet and judge who was given the opportunity to anoint Dowd. God's a great storyteller, is he not? Now, it is curious, and this was such an eye-opener for me. I hope it is for you, that Chana's name sits immediately prior to Chanuk, trained and prepared, dedicated and deployed in many Hebrew texts. Chanuk, you might be saying, scratching your head, who's the heck is Chanuk? Well, what if I were to say Enoch? Chanuk is the person known as Enoch, not the one who stole his name to write the idiotic book. The Enoch who was with Yahweh and then was taken. So that name appears immediately before Chanuk. And Chanuk tells us that it really isn't a name, it's a job description. It says he was trained and prepared. He was dedicated and deployed. Now, this is long before the Torah. So God had to train him and prepare him, dedicate him, and then deploy him. At least this time, before the Torah even existed. Now, if I'm perceiving this correctly, I think that Yahweh has deployed a select group of souls as needed at various places along the timeline to keep his plans and people on track. Should that be the case, and I'm convinced that the evidence is overwhelming and convincing, then God established the model that he would use going forward with Chanuk. As his moniker affirms, he was instructed and equipped, then deployed for this purpose. Based upon the uncommon use of the Hitpael stem, revealing that Chanuk, Enoch, was completely unaffected by societal pressures or constraints, we find an individual influenced by God in advance of his insertion, but not by men, making him particularly serviceable in this role. He is shown on a continual journey with Yahweh, such that they are walking through life and time together. In conjunction with God, their offspring included Mathushek, a man sent out as a stem. Yes, you heard that correctly. Mathushek, a man sent out as a stem. You know one of those?
I know a guy.
I know a guy. Explaining how the choter stem would become the Etz Diath, the full picture provided by the tree of knowledge, all providing the counsel needed to restore Yisrael and lead them back to the tree of lives. So in this way, they would father many sons and daughters for the covenant over the years, would they not? Now, even the fact that he was and would be known for having existed 365 years at a time when the Hebrew calendar was 354 days, suggests that in another life, this same individual would be the first to correlate God's calendar with man's. Therefore, following the clues, it appears that whatever time, place, or title of Yahweh's choosing, he or sometimes she would be inserted into the ordinary flow of time by Yahweh, then removed, returning to God, awaiting the next deployment. Key to understanding the supportive text is the realization our nephesh soul is what matters. It can be put into or taken out of anybody at any time, and we will be doing that throughout eternity. Our nephesh soul is going to be encased in light and energy. And E equals mc squared says that we can take some infinitesimal amount of that energy and translate it into a physical body for our nephesh soul to reside when we wish to be interjected into the ordinary flow of time in the material world. So for God to do that, having invented DNA and living outside of the constraints of time, is exceedingly easy. And it is a beautiful way to solve this problem of having his plan, our key characters, go astray. Like when Dode fell off the wagon. And if someone didn't give him a good talking to, the whole plan was going to end up crumbled on the floor. So he inserted his Alma, most productive mother, followed by her husband, Yada. In this case, he's presenting how he is going to accomplish that through Chanuk. So here's the supporting text. Chanuk, meaning trained and prepared, dedicated and deployed, was unfazed by external human influences in his consistent walk through life. Wahalak, he, free of human cultural, societal, religious, or political control mechanisms, traveled with, in the Hitpael, imperfect, third person, masculine, singular. He traveled through life under these circumstances with the Almighty. Afterwards, he delivered him with, or he delivered with him, I should say. He delivered with him Mathush-Shalak, a man sent as a stem. Of course, an individual dispatched as a shoot. From math, man, Shalak, sent out, and Shalak, shoot, stem, or sprout. At 300 years. Then he fathered other sons and daughters. Oh, yes, he did. All of the days of Chanuks, trained and dedicated, as well as deployed, was and will be 365 years. So, Chanuk, trained and prepared, dedicated and deployed, unfazed by external societal influences, consistently walked, traveling through life and time with the Almighty. And then there was nothing of him, because God had grasped hold of him at that moment and obtained him for a period of time. Lakash eth Hu. He took him, selecting and choosing him, receiving and accepting that which pertained to him. Call, quite literally, perfect for that moment in time, third person, masculine, singular. Barashith in the beginning, Genesis 5:22 through 24. Boy, I hope this plan, what I've just shared, resonates with you as it does with me. It is the ultimate explanation for all of this. It's how God keeps his plans on schedule. It's how he can intervene without interfering with free will. without making such a spectacle that he makes a comedy of the whole opportunity to choose him or reject him, but yet assures that we end up where we need to be at the right time, in the right way, with the correct message. In my view, God's plan is absolutely genius. You see, God can infuse any situation under these circumstances with whatever influence, incentive, or protection is needed to keep his plan moving forward without ever violating free will or cause and effect, because he's doing it along the timeline as opposed to bringing somebody back in time. Every insertion becomes a teaching opportunity. He continues to work with and through his creation, which is his primary manifesto. He continues to work through people, his creation, rather than overpowering it or against it. Moshe, Dod, Shalomo, and Yeshaya could speak confidently about the Nakar, this observant foreigner, the Amma, the productive mother, because they had witnessed them in action. I would think I would give my right arm to have the covenant family and others have an appreciation of how powerful that insight is and how brilliantly it is conveyed through Chanukh, and what it means to be the Choder, to be the Nakar, to be the Ashar, to be the Amma, to be this Shamim. God could speak powerfully of her, confidently of her, because he knew her. The Shamin, desolate woman whose husband is Baal, in anticipation of her prolific addition to the covenant family, God says to her, you should want to enlarge. To Rakab, you should choose to make expansive and roomy, electing to joyfully take advantage of this opportunity to expand the spatial dimensions of this place, to take a stand and arise of your tent and brilliant dwelling place for your household. And the sheltering curtains of your tabernacle spread out. Do not withhold dimensionality, increasing your cords for the remnant. Mithara ata, the 10 strings which hold up, enlarge, and secure your feminine singular dwelling for those who remain. It's from my to question, to ponder the implications of, seeking answers regarding Yathar, the remnant who are left. Does that ring a bell? Then elect to strengthen, toughening and hardening Shazak. Yes, there would be a woman who would be Shazak in addition to her man. Your tent pegs. Yeshaya, Isaiah 54:2. The terminology used in the follow-on sentence affirms that this barren woman's family will be conceived in the years prior to the fulfillment of the fall Mikra in 2033, year 6,000 Yah. This coincides with Leah's marriage to Yada, which is also presented in this prophecy as Baal. With many new children joining the covenant, God will accommodate her growing family during the millennial celebration of Sukkah by expanding Eden so that it covers the entire earth. The heart of the land will still be Jerusalem, the city of Dode. Therein, the Makom, we find the standing place, which is the Temple Mount on Moriah, Mount Moriah. The tent will be stationed there at this time. It will be a replica of the tent of the restoring witness. I've seen it flutter in the breeze. And since the Ark of the Covenant will be repositioned inside during this period, the sheltering curtains will have to be spread out again. This reestablishes, of course, the Amma and Ashar, Leah, in her role as the fashion coordinator and the seamstress of Forevermore. Throughout this announcement, the subject of each action remains a uniquely prolific woman. At the mention of Shazak, strengthening and toughening, the mithar, the cords, may seem perfunctory at first glance, since it would be prudent to secure the tabernacle on top of the Temple Mount, would it not? However, it is also a play on words that inspires a pertinent lesson, because it is the mortal remnant whose resolve will need to be intensified for them to prosper during the millennial observance of Sukkah shelters. I had a good friend that wrote me today saying, I don't understand free will in this period. And I don't know if he was asking about the free will of the mortal remnant or the free will of the covenant family who will be teaching them, but just as a insight, because if he had this question, I'm sure others may have it as well. Free will is going to be very different during this celebration of Sukkah, as we have the mortal remnant of Yisrael brought back into this covenant family, which is why Shazak here is an important term. Now, people have full reign with free will. They can go completely off the rails. So look at MAGAs and Marxists and Muslims and Christians and the like. I mean, they're crazy with their expressions of free will, and they're allowed to run with it. That is not going to be the case in the millennial Shabbat. And we know that because when Yahweh speaks of reaffirming his covenant upon his return with Yisrael and Yehudim, he is specifically saying that the kind of misleading statements that festered into religions prior to that time will be nipped in the bud. They will not be allowed to build up to the point that they mislead many and take them astray. God's going to make certain that you have the opportunity to make a mistake, no big deal. Correct it and move on, learn from it. But if you want to double down or triple down and you want to solicit others to your cause and promote your mistake, you're done. You will be marshaled out of that time. And then speaking of the covenant family, who will be their teachers, our expression of free will also be different. That's the reason why Yahweh is writing a copy of his Torah instructions inside of us. We will have to have some guardrails. We're going to have to know what is and isn't prudent for us to do as we're exposed to the fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh dimensions, so we don't mess things up. Time, for example, we'll be able to witness antecedent time, but not engage in it, because we would destroy the fabric of the universe. We can go to the future and witness what's happening there, but we're going to have to be very careful as to how we act within time, how we act around a black hole, which is equivalent to Sheol, how we respond to the opportunity to manipulate the three-dimensional alphabet of DNA, the fabric of life. So there will be some constraints as to what we can do, because there are things that would be devastating. And, if one or more of us goes crazy and starts opposing God, and I can't think of any motivation for doing that, so it's kind of a hypothetical scenario. But should somebody do that, it's either going to have to be resolved quickly, or God will have no choice but to dispatch that soul to Sheol. So free will, while the opportunities will be much greater for us and our choices will be much more extensive, it's like an infinity times infinity times infinity times infinity more options and choices for us. Free will is all about making choices. We're going to have infinity to the fourth power more options and choices going forward. So lots of expression of our will in all of those choices. However, we're also going to have some guardrails on it so that we don't do something that puts everyone in harm's way. So I hope that's kind of an answer. The other part that I think of his question was, how do we present ourselves when we're, as covenant, we have the ability to transition between energy and matter? And how do we do that and interact in such a way that just doesn't blow people away? And I think the answer to that is pretty straightforward too. While we're teachers and we're here engaged on the earth, we're going to be in physical bodies. And we're going to be stuck in the ordinary flow of time in physical bodies. We'll be, using forms of transport that are appropriate under those circumstances, and means of communication that are appropriate under those circumstances. And it will be a physical being talking to a physical being. But the covenant members are going to have the opportunity to withdraw from that responsibility and spend time in other dimensions. And the scheduling of that, though, becomes exceedingly difficult to even comprehend or speak of here, because while Earth will progress on a normal flow of time, once we leave this realm, you could potentially spend a year exploring someplace in the universe and have 1 second go by here on Earth. So I can't really speak to the timing, but I do think that the E equals MC squared of how energy is the same thing as matter, but a different amount of it. So we can take a bit of the energy that is now housing our soul and transform it into matter using the DNA equation and alphabet to re-engage here on Earth when it's appropriate, or on any other planet, or at any other time we want to sing a song, or feel the warmth of a sun on our face, or the breeze, or have a nice meal, a glass of wine, any of these things, sing a great song. We need that. And so we'll be able to go back and forth between these. And I think it's just going to make our eternal existence wonderful and a much more enjoyable, incredible way of interacting with the remnant of Israel. Those are my conclusions based upon everything that we have studied. I hope they answered the question that I was asked by Perry. And if not, he is a bold man. He will rephrase it. And for those of you, if I have stated something that is inconsistent with your understanding, feel free to post that. You're going to have to post it, though, even though I know that 90% of the posts now are on Facebook, and that a program like this might have 1,000 responses in real time as we are airing it on the various platforms that we communicate. There might be 30, 40, 50 on Facebook. And it's on Facebook that I go to. It's just the easiest platform for me to use, because once the show has completed and I'm now free to interact, that chat room is no longer up on these other social media platforms, and it would just be too much for me to do anyway. It'd be too taken away from other responsibilities. So, little insight in that regard. The best place to reach me, if you have one of these kind of questions, is add a comment to one of the recent posts on Facebook, and I'm sure to see it and can respond to it that way, in a way that would be beneficial to all in terms of the answer. So I think that's the reason why Shazak is mentioned here. We will need to be toughening up. The very tenor of the mortal remnants that is going to enter the Sukkah celebration of the Shabbat during this time, because if they don't have some backbone and some character and some chutzpah, if you will, to use the Yiddish term, they're not going to fare very well, because we're going to be engaged, we're going to be working, we're going to be productive, we're going to show we have the resolve to overcome challenges, and we're going to build a wonderful world together for over 1,000 years, working together. So some shazak will be quite helpful. Plus the fact you're going to be exposed, if you're a part of this remnant, you're going to be exposed to some very shazak individuals, starting with this Baal Choder and Nakar all the way down. King's going to be shazak. I'm going to be shazak. This marvelous mother, she will be shazak as well. And if you don't want to be overpowered, it's highly recommended. We don't do well with the meek. Now, the opening line of what follows reaffirms that there will be many souls added to the family of God on Teruah. Now, this is largely the result of the sacrifice of the Adamah Parah, purging this final remnant who are now spread out to the right and to the left, all around the Temple Mount. At this moment, it is signaling their imminent arrival, and that there will be copious amounts of water that will be released to cleanse these remnant that are gathered of Israelites and Yehudim in the manner of a woman's water breaking, if you will, in anticipation of giving them new life, a second chance, a rebirth. Particularly reassuring is that the Ammah's offspring will be spread out, as we've said here, to the right and to the left, to the north and to the south. And that means that there may be some goyim with the Israelites born into the covenant during Teruah, or it could just mean that there will be Yehudim and Yisrael at this. But I think that the most likely scenario is that during the celebration of Teruah, God has promised that there will be goyim brought into Israel with the right attitudes and aptitudes, along with Israelites that will have been minimally, if at all, religious and political. As we have already discovered in Yeshaya 17, additional goyim will be brought to Jerusalem at this time as laborers. This means that the ethnicities and the nations who subjugated and deposed Jews for centuries will be given the opportunity to repay their debt and to square their accounts. God is fair, after all. It reads, "Indeed, you will give birth, creating a significant spreading out, parats. You will burst forth, symbolic of the water breaking and gushing forth from the womb, to the right and on the left, which is the south and the north. Then your seed, representing your offspring and descendants, will inherit and take possession of the Gentile nations and non-Israelites. They will inhabit the desolated and deserted cities." Yeshaya, freedom and salvation are from Yahweh. Isaiah 54:3. Well, this is quite a portrait of what we have in store just 7.5 years from now. We should all be celebrating the great contributions, of course, to the covenant family that are provided by our beloved Ashar. And while I'm aware that there are some who don't much like the idea of the covenant's children inheriting the earth and its people, places, and possessions, when perceived from the proper perspective, well, it's beneficial for everyone. This is ultimately a win-win, totally fair. To restore the conditions experienced in Eden, Yahweh must remove all traces of the political and religious, the militant and the conspiratorial. With them gone, their property and possessions will be abandoned. in the ensuing fire, which has no ongoing, anything that has no ongoing value, of course, is going to be incinerated. That'll be including all military hardware, while that which will be of value to the covenant and this remnant, well, it's going to be retrofitted. It'll be reapportioned rather than destroyed. And during the 1,000 years of Sukkah, things like refineries and power plants, farms and roadways will need to be maintained. I mean, maybe that's why the Amma's husband is called Baal. Maybe it's his responsibility as a former businessman to own these things and control them and watch over them and manage them. They're going to need to be managed and maintained, staffed. So there will be people to do such things under the watchful eye of some or more than one members of the covenant. And maybe it will be like a standard org chart where there'll be a CEO and under that individual, there'll be others who oversee the administration of these things. I can see why we would want to continue to have internet connectivity, why we'd want to still have roads and airplanes and boats and farms that are operating, all of these kinds of things, electricity. Now, because it's just not prudent to think that when God restores the earth back to the conditions of Eden, that people are just going to be all naked out there in the trees. No, there's going to be housing. There must be sanitation. There must be a water supply. There has to be services. And then there needs to be a way for us to communicate and teach these people. So that's why the Goyim are being brought in to provide these services and why there must be an administrator over them. So Goyim, if we're looking through all of this, and some may believe this to be unfair, but I would have you consider the cause and the alternative. You see, Goyim have persecuted and plundered Jews nearly to extinction. And at this time, anti-Semitism will be rampant and almost to the point of becoming a global obsession. Just finding Goyim with acceptable attitudes and aptitudes to contribute is going to be slim pickings. So these are the best of the worst, if you will. And they will not be afforded this opportunity. Had they not been afforded this opportunity, their lives would have been extinguished like all the other religious and political idiots out there who were opposed to Jews and Israel during the Great Conflagration. So this is a distinct honor. Also, keep in mind that everyone will be working. It's not just them, including covenant members and all of those included within the remnant. So labor is not punitive. The conditions are going to be ideal. The management will be divine. The rewards will be extraordinary, not only because the Yobel Freedom Clause will likely still apply, but they will be given the opportunity over time to join the covenant family. And even when we reach the first Yobel and all indentured workers are freed, what to keep everybody from continuing to do their jobs? Isn't that God's very definition of what he considers perfection? Therefore, this is a well-deserved reward for the Ashar's family. It's just compensation. It's also a form of accountability. And it is also a marvelous opportunity for all others. God's plan is fair and it's beneficial. And should you not like it, well, you don't have to participate. You can opt out. Considering how repulsively the men and women of the mother goddess cult, clique, as I like to say, have treated my wife recently, and how discriminatory the world has been towards Jews. I think this is reassuring. And we'll conclude our program with this statement. You should not be concerned about this, because you will not be humiliated or distressed again. You will never be disapproved or shamed by anyone. You will not be mistreated or deprived. Think of what Jews have gone through at the hands of Christians and Muslims and Marxists. Not going to happen again. By contrast, you will not be anxious, dismayed, or confused. Indeed, you will forget being disappointed, humiliated, and shamed when you were younger. And then the contemptible and dishonorable condition of being insulted by you being abandoned by a spouse and forsaken, you will no longer recall or remember ever again. God is setting up the opportunity for a new beginning, a fresh start. This perfect scenario where all of the horrid things that have taken place again are bygones. And we start over with a fresh slate. And working together, all making a contribution, Goyim and Yehudim, men and women, boys and girls, everyone gathered into this opportunity. The horrible conditions of human civilization over the past 6,000 years will be forgotten. And we will begin anew, creating the kind of conditions and people and attitudes and aptitudes that can impress our God, that can earn his trust, that can cause us to feel good about ourselves and about the situation we're in, about the contributions that we're making. So I'd like to leave you at that for this evening. We've gone an hour and 12 minutes into our program. Look forward to being with you next time. I think that this recap by Yeshaya, by Yahweh, speaking through Yeshaya, is such a marvelous way to expand our understanding of that woman and the consequence of her life as she saves our Savior and therefore becomes the mother of the covenant, and how she works together with her husband to achieve all of these things and what we're going to experience over these next 7.5 and then 1,000 years thereafter. It's all being shared with us in a very informative way. So thank you for your time, and look forward to being with you again tomorrow. Good night.